Escaping from Eden, Chapter 9. We didn't see that, and neither did you. It took 3 years to empty the shaft of the rocks and stones that filled it. Month by month, more of the descending staircase was uncovered. Archaeologist Professor Alberto Ruiz Lehoulier began the excavation in 1949 when he discovered a groove hidden in a pyramid at the abandoned Mayan city of Palenque. The groove led to a shaft, descending below the foundations of a stepped pyramid called the Temple of Inscriptions. In the 4th season of digging, the professor's team reached a triangular stone door. Once the team had broken through the doorway, Ruiz Lehoulier pushed a torch and then his head through the opening they had made. In a state of shock, he called back to his team, "I don't believe what I'm seeing. It looks like a chapel with candles hanging from the ceiling." The candles were stalactites, indicating the antiquity of the chamber, which was about 7 meters in length. Further excavation revealed that the chamber was a crypt, the secret resting place of a magnificent stone sarcophagus, topped with a stone slab 3.8 meters by 2.2 meters. Carved onto the monolith was a beautiful illustration of a young man, seated and leaning forward in a posture similar to that of a motorcyclist. His hands appear to be manipulating controls and his left foot is positioned on a pedal. Something looking like breathing apparatus adjoins his nose, and underneath the capsule containing the young man is the plume of smoke from the kind of thrusters which would initiate a rocket launch. Translation of the inscription revealed that the young man was Keinij Janab Pakal, the penultimate ruler of Palenque. The rest of the vocabulary of the temple and its neighbors remained a mystery. Ruiz Lehoulier's find was hailed as the greatest discovery in the history of Mesoamerican archaeology. However, the interpretation of the image remains a matter of intense controversy. Many have argued for a great range of interpretations. Many have debunked the description as I have presented it, and which so gripped Eric von Daniken when he learned of the carving. The young man was not an astronaut preparing for a flight, but a king preparing to die. The capsule was not a shuttle or craft, but the stylized mouths of 2 serpents, each open at 90 degrees. The billows underneath the capsule were not smoke plumes from rocket thrusters. They were the beards of the serpents into whose mouths Pakal was falling. Or he was playing the part of a maze god rising up from the jaws of the underworld. But I couldn't see it. I could only see the astronaut. Through the years, interpretations and new mythological explanations of the image only proliferated. Linda Shelley was a university professor and a world-leading authority in Mayan epigraphy and iconography. Her study of Pakal's sarcophagus recognized the motifs surrounding Pakal as representing the features of the Milky Way. This suggests the possibility that Pakal's capsule is on a journey, not to or from the underworld, but a journey through space. The sarcophagus lid is not the only item of interest in Palenque. A number of beautiful stone carvings in the city portray Mayan leaders, many of whom are sporting elaborate headgear and jewelry depicting what you or I would instantly recognize as a Bluetooth device, worn in the ear, with a microphone extension to the mouth. They are images that leave the onlooker open-mouthed and asking, "What in the world is going on here?" We seem to be catching glimpses of some out-of-place artifacts. If Linda Shelley's reading is right, and Pakal really is piloting a capsule through the Milky Way, then he is piloting what the ancient Vedic scriptures call Vimanas. Expressed in the world's oldest written language, these ancient texts date from 1500 BC to 500 BC. These stories make reference to innumerable details concerning the Vimanas, how they looked, their airspeed, the kind of noise they made, how many people they could carry, and even specify the elements used in their propulsion systems, which included quicksilver and mica. The functions described correlate with what we would understand as space shuttles. They would fly on Earth. They could carry people to a mother ship and make jaunts around the local solar system. There is no doubt that to the reader delving into ancient Indian history, Vimanas are presented as an ancient technology belonging to the gods. It is curious that we find such technology referenced in literature spanning the globe from Mexico to India. Carvings and artifacts representing this kind of technology can be found among the artifacts of the ancient Olmec, Aztec, Mayan societies, as well as in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Figures sporting costumes that evoke spacesuits with helmets and breathing apparatus have been found depicted by ancient Japanese, Chinese, Mayan, Aztec, the Hopi people of North America, and by ancient indigenous Australians in Kimberley region of Australia. The National Museum of Guatemala has a whole section devoted to ancient carved heads with space helmets. The technologies referenced in their art and costumes are instantly recognizable to the museum's visitors. But where is any of that in the Bible? Ezekiel lived from the 6th to 7th century BC and spent a portion of his life in Babylonia. He is known as a writer of apocalyptic prose. Apocalyptic is a name scholars apply to things seen by ancient writers which are described by analogy. Mind-stretching metaphor is reached for because the writer does not understand what he has seen, but is compelled to describe it, leaving us with images over which the reader also has to puzzle. In his first chapter, Ezekiel describes a mind-boggling encounter. He tells us where it happened, by the river Kebar in Babylonia. Coming down from the sky, Ezekiel witnesses an immense cloud of smoke, filled with light and with lightning sparks emanating from it. He describes metallic legs, burning thrusters, 4 metallic wheels intersected by perpendicular wheels, enabling the vehicle to maneuver without having to turn the wheels. The craft is covered in a sparkling metallic or glass-like canopy. The sound of the craft was like the sound of a waterfall. When the engines are switched off, the wings lower themselves. From the top of the craft, a figure speaks to him. Ezekiel describes him as a human-like. He had the appearance like that of a man. As the craft then carries Ezekiel to Tel Aviv, Ezekiel is fascinated by the environment he is now sitting in. He refers to it wonderingly as Yahweh's habitation, and to the vehicle as a whole as the glory. All through the being's conversation with him in the glory, Ezekiel remains distracted, preoccupied with the swishing sound of the wings, the rumbling sound of the wheels, and the loud rumbling noise behind him. When he arrives in Tel Aviv, Ezekiel says he found the exiles living there and sat among them for 7 days, overwhelmed. Now that is understandable. Over the next 11 chapters, Ezekiel describes similar encounters as the glory lifts him up into the air and carries him to different places. Each time, while the human-like beings are communicating with him, Ezekiel remains fascinated by how the craft moves, how the wings and the wheels work. Because of the human-like beings' interest in the people of Israel, we naturally read this as an encounter with the Jewish God, with Yahweh. Ezekiel, too, interprets the encounter in those terms, and it is these experiences which change Ezekiel's viewpoint forever and put him into the role of a prophet to his countrymen, suffering the pressures of exile. But in all this, we are left puzzling. Does Yahweh really need a noisy, smoky vehicle to travel in? Together with Ezekiel, we are left a little overwhelmed, asking ourselves, what in the world was that? Somehow, our programming bids us to move on and to reason our memory away. Whether we are looking at prehistoric Bluetooth devices, or ancient space shuttles, or beings in space suits, or humanoids in smoky flying machines, we somehow convince ourselves, I did not see what I just saw, and neither did you. Anomalous artifacts of planet Earth and anomalous phenomena in outer space offer us no shortage of opportunities to see things which we either have to explain away or unsee. In recent years, our viewing of the universe around us has revealed objects which appear to be non-natural. One of the most intriguing is Iapetus, one of the moons of Saturn. Anyone familiar with the canon of Star Wars movies will have no problem recognizing it. The Death Star is a moon-sized object, spherical in shape, save for 2 orographic features: a raised rim, marking the equator where the 2 hemispheres have been welded together, and a large, satellite-shaped crater indenting about 1/10 of its surface. The Death Star, in case you're not familiar, is a weaponized mothership, a craft designed to carry millions of people through the reaches of interstellar space. Picture the Death Star and age it a few thousand years, and you have Iapetus. The similarity is so startling it is even acknowledged on the NASA webpage devoted to the moon in question. The massive satellite-shaped crater sits in the same spot just above the moon's equator, which is curious in itself, but it is the 3-mile high ridge around the equator that is particularly fascinating. It gives the appearance of two planetary halves, welded together. It's hard to see it any other way. On closer inspection, the surface of Iapetus turns out to be not spherical. Rather, it describes the more geometric form of a dodecahedron. If George Lucas had created the images for Star Wars in the last decade, we might wink at his imagination and creativity in spotting the eccentric form of Iapetus and recreating it as the Death Star. However, what makes this story far more curious is that the Death Star was designed more than a generation before any of us had seen any image of Iapetus. Star Wars was released in 1976. It was 2005 before any of us realized that the Death Star had a real-world doppelganger. Perhaps others had seen Iapetus before. Could this be another instance of sharing as fiction what we feel we cannot speak as fact? Extraterrestrial motherships and personal space shuttles have been the stuff of movie lore for much of the movie era. In world literature, Hindus have been reading about spacefaring Vimanas in scriptures which, in written form, go back 3,000 to 4,000 years, and in oral tradition into prehistory. Similarly, the ancient Sumerian narratives tell us of space stations and the Sky People's mothership of Nibiru. By contrast, Christians do not generally expect to be reading about extraterrestrial technology or spacefaring vehicles in the Bible. That was certainly the bias of Joseph Blumrich. Blumrich was a senior engineer who served NASA at the Marshall Space Flight Center as the chief systems designer in NASA's Program Development Office. In 1972, Blumrich attended a lecture in which NASA had invited Eric von Daniken to speak. In his lecture, von Daniken addressed the text of Ezekiel that contained these enigmatic references. During refreshment time, after the event, Blumrich sought the speaker out. "Mr. von Daniken," he said, "I enjoyed your presentation, but I think you're looking in the wrong place for technology. The Bible is really focused on spiritual matters. It isn't the kind of literature you're going to find anything technical in." Von Daniken's simple reply was, "Have you read the book of Ezekiel?" Blumrich promised that he would, and applied himself to the Hebrew text with a view of replying to von Daniken with a better informed interpretation. However, when Blumrich did sit down with the text of Ezekiel, something else happened. Out of curiosity, he applied his engineering skills to the descriptions laid out by the prophet in his book. He began to draw schematics of what was being described. The resultant schema blew all his preconceptions about the Bible out the window. The result of Blumrich's studies was a book published in 1974. It was titled The Spaceships of Ezekiel. The subtitle read, "Was Earth Once Visited from Outer Space? Did Alien Beings Walk Our Planet?" A major NASA engineer reveals some astonishing facts. With the 21st century frame of reference, and helped by the work of NASA's Joseph Blumrich, today we are in a position to reassure the ancient Hebrew prophet. Yes, Ezekiel, you really did see what you thought you saw. According to the Vedic scriptures, the Vimanas were the technology of the gods. There is plenty of other anomalous technology in our distant past that might leave us puzzling. In Egypt in 1995, an X-ray was applied to the mummy of an Egyptian leader known as Usermantu. His body was unremarkable, save for the 23-centimeter orthopedic iron pin with which ancient surgeons had repaired his damaged knee. The pin was a flamed screw, held in place by a kind of resin very similar to the bone cement that surgeons use today. Usermantu died around 400 BC. Clearly, our ancestors were cleverer than we thought. There is, in fact, no shortage of evidence that Homo sapiens have always been sapiens. That's to say, we humans have always been clever and creative and technological. But how did that order of technology get lost? Why did it take 2 millennia to recover? Artifacts from Egypt show evidence of stone cutting that would require power and diamond-grade cutting equipment. Where did that technology come from, and where did it go? Archaeological sites around the planet beg the same question. In Lebanon's Bekaa Valley lies the ancient city of Baalbek. Around 15 BC, the Roman occupation began to construct a temple to Jupiter on the foundations of a pre-existing structure. In its heyday, the new temple would have been an awe-inspiring demonstration of Roman civil engineering. Yet it is what lies in the pre-Roman layers of the complex that poses the real historical challenge. In the temple's western retaining wall, 4 courses of stones up, at a height around 7 meters above ground level, is a run of 3 enormous foundation stones. The stone blocks measure 21 meters by 4 meters and 3 meters thick. They weigh up to 800 tons each. To put that in perspective, a Boeing 747 weighs around 400 tons. The blocks had to be quarried, carried to the building site, and then cut with such precision that you cannot fit a piece of paper in the joins from one block to the next. Recently, working with a team from the German Archaeological Institute, Janine Abdul-Masih of the University of Lebanon discovered a single stone within the complex weighing 1,650 tons, the weight of 4 Boeing 747s. In Peru, the enormous stones of the pre-Inca walls of Sacsayhuaman give the appearance that they have been softened and squeezed into one another to provide a flawless, irregular jigsaw, totally absent of cutting marks and patterned with fluid and curved joins. Where did the technology come from that enabled ancient engineers to manipulate blocks of stone like that? And where did the technology go? We see the fruits of their technology, but where is it now? Who is building these structures thousands of years in our past? Some researchers, such as the Swedish designer Henry Kjelsen, have speculated that these kinds of feats of civil engineering may have been achieved by means of sound energy. It is a technology we are just learning, or could it be relearning in the 21st century? In the last decade, experiments conducted at research facilities, including Harvard University and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, have demonstrated how sonic standing waves can be created which can levitate small objects. There are also reports of this technique being used by Tibetan monks in the early 20th century for moving such larger objects. From a purely physical point of view, if standing waves can be created today, there is no reason why they may not have been created in the past. Of course, the sound energy hypothesis is a difficult claim to test. One hint that advanced sound technology may have been part of our prehistory is to be found in a grid of ancient stone circles adorning the landscape of southern Africa. In recent years, South African researcher Michael Tellinger has made a study of the sonic qualities of the stone used in the stone circles, and in collaboration with other researchers, has measured the sound properties of some of these mysterious stone structures. Even in their current state, which looks like the ruin of an international stone maze, each stone circle is generating phenomenal sound energy. Tellinger reports that outside the circles is just ambient noise. Inside the circles, sound frequencies of 14 GHZs, that's higher than a dog can hear, have been measured to a magnitude of 72 dBs. That's between the volume of a vacuum cleaner and a freight train. Curiously, the subterranean ground temperature underneath the circles marks the presence of these energy vortices in a measurable way. Outside the circles, the subterranean temperature, his colleagues have measured, is around 5.5 degrees. Inside the circles, it ranges from 29 to 58 degrees. At present, these energy signatures are only a matter of intrigue to us. They are anomalies that we can measure. But what can we do with them? Moreover, what is the original purpose of this huge sonic energy grid? And it is immense. The work of researcher Jan Heiner has revealed that this grid extends over a vast geographical area, transgressing the modern borders of South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. Could this prehistoric energy matrix have been used as a transportation grid in the ways we are now exploring? And if so, what was being transported and when? To get an idea of when, Michael Tellinger has studied the erosion patterns on the stones where they have been broken in their current setting. These indicate a timeline from the stone circles that go back far beyond the conventional timelines of human development. Tellinger's findings demonstrate that the patinas of the rocks give an age of 200,000 to 300,000 years. Who was here hundreds of thousands of years ago to engineer a power grid based on sound energy? In 2018, the magazine New Scientist published a timeline which mapped landmark moments in human prehistory. The earliest built shelters in Japan have been dated to around 500,000 years ago. The earliest evidence of hunting with spears appears around 400,000 years ago. The oldest surviving human footprints, which are universally acknowledged as such, are found in Italy, dating at around 325,000 years ago. The first complex blades and grinding stones appear 280,000 years ago. 230,000 years ago, Neanderthals suddenly appear. Then, in Ethiopia around 195,000 years ago, the first Homo sapiens have been found. Who was here in the Stone Age 200,000 years ago manipulating sound energy? And where did that technology come from? Clearly, there is a piece of the puzzle missing from the story we have told ourselves concerning human origins. Our planet's heritage of built structures argues with paleontological findings concerning the evolution of our species. Geological anomalies, forgotten tunnel and cave systems, submerged and abandoned cities, all point to cataclysmic punctuations in the history of civilization and inexplicable recoveries. Anomalous technologies hint at assistance either from the hidden remnant of older civilizations or from somewhere further afield. So who has been helping us? If we allow ourselves to be too wedded to the neat and tidy story of human evolution like the one I read at school, then every time we look upon an anomaly, we will be tempted to walk away saying, I did not see what I just saw, and neither did you. However, if we take time to pause and ponder, the questions begin to pile up and point us in new directions. My discoveries in the Sumerian tablets made me think again about some of the things I had seen. Repeating patterns from one ancient culture to the next, the shared cosmological knowledge, the same evidence of now lost technologies, and timelines that argue with almost everything we think we know about human origins. So I was not totally surprised by what Al Worden had to say on Breakfast Time TV one Friday morning. Colonel Alfred Worden is a tough, no-BS NASA astronaut who piloted Apollo 15 on its mission to the moon in 1971. While his colleagues were walking on the moon's surface and trying out the all-new moon rover, Al famously orbited the moon 75 times. His remarks came towards the end of his appearance on the UK's Good Morning Britain in 2017. In the final 2 minutes of the interview, the host, Ben Shepherd, casually asked him, "Do you think there are extraterrestrials out there, Al?" This was the Colonel's reply. "You know, I've been asked that question hundreds of times. Do you believe in aliens? And I say, yeah. They say, have you ever seen one? I say, yeah. I look in the mirror every morning. Because that's what we are. We are the aliens. We just think there's somebody else. We are the ones who came from somewhere else. Because somebody else had to survive, and they got in a little spaceship and they came here. That's what I believe. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they had to say about it. They'll tell you right up front." And that is the end of Chapter 9. Peace and blessings to you all.